A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. Imagine you are sitting on a jagged mountain peak, miles from the nearest paved road. You have got a laptop open, and you are streaming a 4K video feed to a global audience without a single frame drop. To anyone watching, it looks like you are plugged into a fiber optic line in a downtown office, but in reality, you have only got one shaky bar of LTE and a patch of sky for a satellite dish. This isn't magic, and it isn't just luck. It is the result of a very specific, very nerdy bit of networking wizardry called cellular bonding.
It is the holy grail for anyone who works from the road or lives off-grid. Today's prompt from Daniel is all about this world of unbreakable connectivity. He wants us to dig into how we combine multiple cellular links and satellite feeds into one rock-solid pipe. I am Herman Poppleberry, by the way, and I have been diving into the latest spec sheets for the hardware that makes this possible.
And I am Corn. I am the one usually asking why we need 3 different internet connections just to check email. But after seeing what happens when a Zoom call drops during a critical meeting because a cloud passed over a satellite, I am starting to see the light. Also, fun fact, today's episode is actually being powered by Google Gemini 3 Flash. It is the brain behind the script today, so if we start sounding too much like a highly optimized language model, you know why.
I think we can handle the human element, Corn, or the sloth and donkey element. But the topic today is seriously cool because the landscape has shifted so much just in the last year. With Starlink's direct-to-cell service really hitting its stride here in 2026, and 5G standalone networks finally offering the latency we were promised years ago, the how of staying connected has changed.
Right, because it used to be that if you were in a dead zone, you were just dead to the world. Now, we are talking about aggregating signals. But let's start with the basics for a second, Herman, because I think people hear bonding, and they just think it means having a backup. Like, if my Wi-Fi dies, my phone switches to LTE. That is not what we are talking about here, is it?
Not even close. That is just failover, or at best, basic load balancing. If you are load balancing, your router might send your Netflix traffic over Starlink and your Zoom call over a cellular plan. If the Starlink connection blips for 10 seconds, that Netflix video might buffer, but if the Zoom call was on that link, it just dies. You have to reconnect, wait for the handshake, and apologize to your boss. Bonding is different. It happens at the packet level.
Okay, explain that to me like I am a sloth who just wants his video to play. What does packet level actually mean in the real world?
Think of your data like a single frame of a video call as a deck of cards. In a normal connection, you send the whole deck down one path. In bonding, the router takes that deck, deals the cards out across 3 or 4 different paths simultaneously, and then a server on the other end gathers them all up and puts them back in the right order. If a gust of wind knocks over the table where one of those paths is running, the other paths still deliver the rest of the cards. The deck still arrives. The connection never breaks.
So it is essentially creating a single logical pipe out of multiple physical ones. If I have 3 connections that are 10 megabits each, do I actually get a 30 megabit pipe?
In a perfect world, yes. In reality, there is a bit of bonding tax because of the overhead needed to manage all those packets and reassemble them, but you are getting much closer to that combined speed than you ever would with a standard router. But more importantly, you get unbreakable internet. You could literally unplug your main satellite dish in the middle of a stream, and as long as your cellular backup is bonded, the stream just keeps humming along.
But wait, how does the website on the other end know what's happening? If I'm sending bits of my data from an AT&T IP address and other bits from a Starlink IP, Wouldn't a website like a bank just get confused and block me?
That is the genius of the bonding server. To the bank or the Zoom server, all those packets look like they are coming from one single source, the bonding server's IP address. The server acts as a proxy. It's the middleman that hides the messy reality of your three different connections from the rest of the internet.
That sounds expensive and complicated. I am guessing you can't just do this with a standard router you pick up at a big box store.
You definitely cannot. You need specialized hardware and, crucially, a bonding server. This is the part that trips people up. Because the packets are being split at your end, something has to be on the other end to catch them and stitch them back together before they go out to the rest of the internet. That is where SD-WAN, or Software Defined Wide Area Network, comes in.
Okay, let's talk hardware first. If I am a connectivity warrior out in a van or a remote cabin, what am I actually bolting to my wall?
The gold standard for a long time has been Peplink. Their Max Transit Duo Pro or the BR2 Pro are basically the industry benchmarks. These things are built like tanks. They have multiple cellular modems built right into the chassis. So you don't just have one SIM card, you might have 2 or 4, all active at the same time.
I saw a new one mentioned in the research recently, the Teltonika RUTX50. That came out late in 2024, right?
Yeah, and it has been a game changer for the mid-range market. It supports 5G standalone out of the box and dual SIM bonding. It is a bit more industrial and requires a bit more technical know-how to set up than a Peplink, but for the price, it is incredible. Then you have things like the InstiConnect, which is huge in the RV community because it combines the modem and the antenna into one unit that sits on your roof. It simplifies the whole running wires through the ceiling. Nightmare.
But if the modem is on the roof, doesn't it get fried in the sun? I've had my phone shut down just sitting on a dashboard in July.
These industrial units are rated for temperatures that would make a smartphone melt. We're talking about operating ranges from -40 to 75 degrees Celsius. They use heavy-duty heat sinks and often specialized enclosures. The InstiConnect, for example, uses a PoE or power over Ethernet cable, so all the sensitive electronics are getting power and sending data over one ruggedized wire.
And what about the antennas? Because I feel like people underestimate how much the physical ears of the device matter when you are miles from a tower.
It is everything. You want 4x4 MIMO antennas. That stands for multiple input, multiple output. It essentially means the device can talk to the tower on 4 different lanes at once. If you are using a little plastic stick antenna inside a metal van, you are killing your signal. You need those high gain arrays on the roof.
I've seen those shark fin antennas on top of police cars and ambulances. Is that what we're talking about?
Companies like Parsec or Pointing make these low-profile domes. Inside that one dome, there are actually 7 or 9 individual antenna elements, 4 for 5G, 4 for Wi-Fi, and 1 for GPS. It's a massive amount of engineering packed into a piece of plastic the size of a dinner plate.
So, I have got my rugged router, I've got my 4x4 MIMO antenna, and I've got 3 different SIM cards from 3 different carriers. Because you don't want to double down on just one network, right?
You want carrier diversity. One Verizon, one AT&T, maybe a T-Mobile, or even a local regional provider. If one tower is congested or the backhaul to that tower is down, the others carry the load. But now we hit the handshake problem I mentioned. You need a server.
Right, the brain in the cloud. Daniel asked if we need to set up our own SD-WAN server. Is that a yes for everyone, or are there easier ways?
There are 3 main paths you can take. Path 1 is the turnkey solution. If you buy a Peplink, they have a service called SpeedFusion Cloud. You basically pay a monthly subscription, click a button in the dashboard, and Peplink handles the server side. Your router connects to their nearest data center, and the bonding happens automatically. No Linux commands required.
That sounds like the sloth-friendly version. I like that. What is Path 2?
Path 2 is the Pro way, which is self-hosting a virtual appliance. Peplink calls theirs Fusion Hub. You can spin up a tiny server on a cloud provider like DigitalOcean or AWS for maybe $5 or $10 a month. You install the Fusion Hub software, and now your router bonds to your own private server. The big advantage here is you get a static IP address.
Why does a static IP matter for someone living in a tent?
Because if you are constantly switching between cellular towers and satellites, Your IP address is usually jumping all over the place. That drives security systems and banking apps crazy. They think you are being hacked. If you bond to your own server, the rest of the world only sees that one static IP. Everything stays logged in, and you can even host a small server or a VPN back to your home network without any issues.
Does that also help with things like Netflix geolocking? If my bonding server is in New York, but I'm camping in the Yukon, does Netflix think I'm in the Big Apple?
Precisely. It's like a permanent high-speed VPN that never disconnects. You can place your exit point anywhere in the world where your cloud provider has a data center. If you want to appear like you're in London while you're actually in a desert in Arizona, Path 2 makes that happen.
Okay, that makes sense. And Path 3? I'm guessing this is the one where you spend 3 days staring at a terminal window.
That would be the open source route. Projects like OpenMPTC Prouter or SmoothWAN. You can run these on a Raspberry Pi or a generic GL.inet router. You still need a VPS, a virtual private server, to act as the aggregator, but you aren't paying a hardware manufacturer for a proprietary license. It is much cheaper, but if it breaks at 3 a.m. while you're in the middle of the woods, there is no tech support to call. You are the tech support.
Yeah, I think I will stick to Path 1 or 2. But let's look at the hybrid approach Daniel mentioned. Because cellular isn't the only game in town anymore, Starlink is everywhere. How does a satellite dish fit into a bonding setup?
This is actually the most exciting part of connectivity in 2026. We used to think of Starlink as a replacement for cellular, but the real pros use it as a component of a bonded system. Starlink is fast. You can get 200 megabits per second in the middle of nowhere, but it has these tiny micro-outages. Maybe a satellite handoff takes a millisecond too long, or a tree branch barely clips the signal.
And that is enough to drop a void call.
Precisely. So, what you do is you bond Starlink with a cellular connection. The router uses Starlink for the bulk of the data because it is fast and usually has higher data caps, but it uses the cellular link to smooth out the latency. If Starlink jitters for half a second, the bonded tunnel instantly shifts those specific packets to the cellular link. You don't even notice it happened. It makes satellite internet feel as stable as a fiber connection.
It is like having a suspension system for your data. The cellular is the shock absorber for the bumps in the satellite signal.
That is actually a great way to put it. And with the Starlink Mini being so portable now, people are literally throwing a dish and a Peplink router into a backpack and having enterprise-grade internet while hiking. But we should talk about the cost, because this isn't exactly a budget hobby.
Right, let's do a reality check. If I want to set this up today, what am I looking at for hardware and monthly fees? Because 3 SIM cards and a satellite sub, that adds up.
It does. A decent bonding router like the Peplink BR1 Pro is going to run you about $500 to $600. If you want the dual modem BR2 Pro, you're looking at $2,000. Then you have the antennas, which are another $200. Starlink is what, $120 a month? Plus maybe $50 for each cellular plan? You could easily be spending $300 to $400 a month just to stay connected.
That is a car payment for most people. So, who is this actually for? Is it just for digital nomads with deep pockets? Or is there a budget version of this for the rest of us?
There is a budget-ish version. You can use a software-based bonding service called Speedify. It runs on your laptop or phone. You can plug in a USB cellular dongle, connect to the local Wi-Fi, and use your phone's internal LTE all at once. Speedify bonds them in the cloud. It is much cheaper, maybe $10 a month for the service, but it only protects the device it is running on. It doesn't give your whole house or RV bonded internet.
But wait, if I use Speedify on my laptop, can I share that bonding connection to my tablet or my phone?
You can tether from the laptop, but you start running into the same limitations we talked about with basic routers. The laptop's processor has to do all the heavy lifting of encrypted bonding while also running your browser and your apps. It works in a pinch for a coffee shop, but I wouldn't rely on it for a 24/7 home-on-wheels setup.
I feel like we should also mention the bonding tax again. You mentioned it uses more data. If I am on a capped cellular plan, which most are, how much am I losing to the overhead?
It is usually around 15 to 20%. So if you download a 1 gigabyte file, you are actually pulling about 1.2 gigabytes across your various links. The router has to add headers to every single packet so the server knows how to put them back together. It also sends heartbeat packets to check which links are healthy. It is the price you pay for stability.
What about latency? If I am a gamer trying to play an online shooter from a cabin, does bonding help or hurt?
It is a double-edged sword. Bonding can actually reduce jitter, the variation in latency, which is what usually kills gaming. It makes the connection feel smoother. But because the data has to travel to a bonding server before it goes to the game server, you are adding a hop. Usually that adds about 10 to 20 milliseconds of latency. For most people, that is a fair trade-off for a connection that doesn't drop.
So, if you're a professional esports player, maybe don't play from a van in the middle of the Mojave. But for a casual round of Call of Duty, you're probably fine.
And some advanced routers actually let you set sub-rules. You can tell the router, send my gaming traffic only over the lowest latency link without bonding, but bond everything else. It gives you the best of both worlds if you're willing to spend time in the settings menu.
Let's talk about the why for a second. Beyond just wanting to watch Netflix in the woods, there are some serious second-order effects to this technology. Think about mobile journalism or disaster response.
That is where this tech was born, honestly. Companies like Desjardins and Teradek have been doing this for news crews for a decade. Before bonding, you needed a massive satellite truck to do a live remote broadcast. Now a reporter can have a backpack with 6 bonded cellular modems and stream high-def video directly to the studio. In a disaster zone where the local infrastructure is shredded, being able to create a stable pipe out of thin air is life-saving.
I actually read a case study about this during the hurricane season last year. Emergency crews were using bonded setups to provide Wi-Fi hotspots for survivors to call their families. They were pulling signal from towers 30 miles away that were still standing and bonding them with Starlink.
That's the real-world impact. When the primary fiber lines are cut, bonding is the only way to get fiber-like reliability, and we are seeing that move into the consumer space now. I mean, Daniel's prompt mentions the off-road warriors. There is a whole community of people who aren't just camping. They are running full-scale businesses from the middle of a desert.
Right, and they are using this tech to bypass the limitations of any single carrier. What I find really interesting is how this might change as 5G standalone or 5G SA becomes the norm. Right now, a lot of 5G is still non-standalone, meaning it relies on a 4G core. But 5G SA allows for things like network slicing. Oh boy, here we go. Explain network slicing before my sloth brain falls asleep.
It just means the carrier can virtually slice a portion of the bandwidth and dedicate it to a specific use, like low latency gaming or high reliability emergency services. Some people argue that once 5G SA is everywhere, we won't need bonding because the network itself will be reliable enough.
I will believe that when I see it. I have never known a cellular carrier to be reliable enough when you actually need them.
I am with you on that. Even with network slicing, you are still relying on one company's hardware in one tower. Bonding is about independence. It is about saying, I don't trust any one of you, so I'm going to use all of you.
It is the ultimate trust, but verify strategy for the internet. So, if someone is listening to this and they are ready to take the plunge, what is the sweet spot setup? Not the $2,000 enterprise rig, but the one that actually makes sense for a serious remote worker.
For most people, I think the sweet spot is a Peplink Balance 20X. It is a bit more affordable, around $500. It has one built-in cellular modem and an expansion slot where you can add a second one later. You plug your Starlink into the WAN port, put a high-quality SIM in the internal modem, and use Peplink's SpeedFusion Cloud. No server to set up, but you get that unbreakable connection for your most important traffic, like Zoom or Teams.
What about the SIM cards themselves? Can I just use the one from my iPad?
You can, but you have to be careful about the TTL settings, time to live. Carriers can tell if a SIM is in a router versus a tablet, and they might throttle you to 3G speeds. The sweet spot usually involves getting a dedicated business data plan or using a third-party reseller that specializes in nomad data. It's a bit of a cat and mouse game with the carriers.
And if they are the tinkerer type, the ones who want to save that $50 a month subscription fee,
Then you look at something like the GL.iNet Flint 2. It is a powerful Wi-Fi 7 router that can run specialized firmware. You pair that with a cheap VPS from a provider like Vultr and run OpenMPTC Prouter. You will spend a lot more time on forums and YouTube tutorials, but you will have a system that is entirely yours. No cloud middleman.
I think there is also a middle ground where you host your own Fusion hub. You mentioned that earlier. If you already have a home server or a dedicated office, couldn't you just bond back to your own house?
If you have a gigabit fiber connection at home, you can put a peplink router there. Then, when you are on the road, your mobile router tunnels back to your home. Your internet exit point is your own living room. This is huge for accessing local files or streaming content that is region locked. It is like a private, high-speed bridge between your home and wherever you happen to be parked.
Is there a limit to how many connections you can bond? Like, could I have 10 different SIM cards if I was truly paranoid?
Theoretically, yes. Some ultra high-end peplink routers can bond up to 13 different links, but at that point you're hitting diminishing returns. The bonding tax starts to eat up so much of the bandwidth that you're actually slowing yourself down. For most people, 2 cellular links and 1 satellite link is the Goldilocks zone.
That is actually a really cool use case. It is like you never left your home network. But we have to talk about the limitations too. What can bonding not solve? Because I don't want people thinking this is a magic internet everywhere button.
The biggest thing it can't solve is total lack of signal. If you are in a deep canyon and there is no cellular signal and no view of the sky for Starlink, 3 bonded modems will give you exactly 0 megabits per second. Bonding can only aggregate what is actually there. It also can't solve for regulatory caps. If you have 3 unlimited plans that all throttle you after 50 gigabytes, bonding them just means you will hit those throttles 3 times as fast.
Right, and unlimited rarely means unlimited in the cellular world, especially for hotspot data. You have to be really careful about which plans you pick.
Very careful. You want plans that are specifically designed for data-only devices, which are often more expensive, and you have to keep an eye on the hardware temperature. These bonding routers are doing a lot of heavy lifting, and they can get hot, especially if they are tucked away in an unventilated cabinet in a van.
So don't hide your $2,000 router under a pile of laundry. Got it. What about the future? Daniel mentioned Starlink's direct-to-cell. Is that going to change the bonding game?
It might change the emergency end of the spectrum. Right now, direct-to-cell is mostly for SMS and basic messaging. By 2026, we are seeing the first real data implementations. But the speeds are still going to be low. Think kilobits, not megabits. It is great for a SOS message, but it isn't going to replace a bonded 5G array for a while.
But it could be another link in the chain. Like a last resort bonded link.
Imagine a router that has Starlink satellite, 3 cellular carriers, and a direct-to-cell fallback. You would essentially have to be at the bottom of the ocean or inside a lead-line bunker to lose connectivity.
Which, knowing our listeners, someone is probably trying to do right now. How do I get 5G in my lead-lined bunker? We actually had an episode about that, didn't we?
We did. It involved a lot of specialized cables and probably some structural damage to the bunker. But for the average person, the takeaway here is that we have moved past the era of hoping the Wi-Fi works. We now have the tools to build our own infrastructure.
It is a shift in mindset. You are no longer a consumer of someone else's network. You are the architect of your own. You are taking pieces from Elon Musk, pieces from Verizon, pieces from T-Mobile, and stitching them together into something that is better than the sum of its parts.
And that is why it is so imaginative, as Daniel put it. It is about using software to overcome the physical limitations of the world around us. Whether it is terrain, distance, or just a crappy tower, we can code our way around it.
I think we've covered the how and the why pretty thoroughly, but let's look at the what's next. Are we going to see this tech integrated into phones? Could my future iPhone bond its internal 5G with the local Starbucks Wi-Fi automatically?
Apple and Google have been flirting with this for years. They call it Wi-Fi Assist or Adaptive Connectivity. But they usually use it for failover, not true bonding. The reason is battery life. Packet-level bonding is a processor hog. Doing that on a tiny smartphone battery would kill your phone in 2 hours. For now, it is likely to stay in the realm of dedicated hardware routers and pro rigs.
So, my sloth-like dream of having unbreakable internet on my phone without carrying a backpack full of gear is still a few years off.
Probably. But for anyone who values their sanity during a remote workday, the backpack full of gear is a small price to pay.
I think it's also worth mentioning the social aspect of this. If you're the person in the campground with a 4-carrier bonded rig, you basically become the local hero. You're the one person who can actually stream the Super Bowl while everyone else is staring at a buffering wheel.
Oh, absolutely. I've seen people set up guest networks on their bonded routers and charge their neighbors in beer or firewood. It's a whole microeconomy of connectivity.
Fair enough. I think that covers the bulk of what Daniel was asking. We looked at the hardware, PepLink, Teltonica, InstiConnect. We looked at the SD-WAN requirement, Speed Fusion Cloud versus self-hosting Fusion Hub or OpenMPTC router. And we looked at the shift towards Starlink plus Cellular as the new gold standard.
It is a deep rabbit hole, but once you experience unbreakable internet, it is really hard to go back to a single connection. It is like driving a car with 4-wheel drive versus 1-wheel drive. You just feel more confident heading into the unknown.
Well, I'm feeling a lot more confident about my next mountaintop Zoom call, as long as I can find someone else to carry the gear up the mountain for me.
I wouldn't count on me for that, Corn. I am a donkey, but even I have my limits.
True. I guess I will have to look into a bonded internet-carrying drone. That is probably the next prompt from Daniel anyway.
Don't give him ideas.
Too late, he's probably already writing it. But for now, I think we have given people a solid foundation for their off-grid connectivity journey. It is a big world out there, and thanks to cellular bonding, it is a lot better connected than it used to be.
And a big thanks to our producer Hilbert Flumingtop for keeping our own connection stable during this recording.
Also, a huge shout out to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power the generation of this show. We literally couldn't do this without that serverless horsepower.
This has been My Weird Prompts. If you have been finding these deep dives helpful, or if you have managed to build a bonded rig in a lead line bunker, let us know. You can find all our episodes and subscribe at myweirdprompts.com.
Or search for us on Telegram to get notified the second a new episode drops. We are everywhere you listen to podcasts, and probably a few places you don't.
Stay connected, everyone.
And keep those weird prompts coming. See ya!
Good.
This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash, text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow to